My name is David Kendall. I live in Hancock, Maine. I'm petrified for all of you because you have no clue what this rainbow movement is, what it is capable of, or what its agenda is. I was a transgender woman for over 20 years. I was an advocate and a member of this movement for over 30 years. The lgbTQia trans queer rainbow cult, this movement now represents perversion. I was targeted, I was groomed and victimized by this movement in the same manner as we see here with the agenda now sexualizing and confusing children, presenting young minds with pornographic materials, pushing an agenda that is created to manipulate and confiscate your children, mind, body, and soul is criminal. Anyone that thinks a child can decide their gender because of a non-existent gender spectrum is insane. I suffered from gender dysphoria. The definition of dysphoria is an abnormal condition of mental confusion. I suffered from an abnormal condition of mental confusion. When a child is targeted, groomed, desensitized, sexualized, and victimized, there is something in that child's mind that gets switched on. It's not meant to be switched on, not in a child or anyone that cannot make sound, reasonable, and cognitive decisions. These books, as well as the curriculum, anything lgbTQia, trans, queer, gender ideology, or rainbow-ish, push techniques of desensitizing children to the extremes of fetish, rape, porn, sadomasochistic role play, bestiality, prostitution, incest, and that list goes on. I was the suicidal trans kid that is always brought up in these discussions, but I was also a suicidal trans adult. You know why? Because affirmation, transition, and acceptance does not take away depression, confusion, pain, or delusions of being trapped in the wrong body, which is an impossibility, by the way. These children are only regurgitating what they have been force-fed by this cult and by those promoting, encouraging, and celebrating this assault on children. 350 educators in K-12 schools in 2022 arrested on sex crimes against children. Does nobody else see the danger when teachers and school staff try desperately to defend children being targeted, sexualized, and groomed? The question should be, that was 350 were arrested and charged. How many went unreported?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was molested, what the LGBT movement calls recruited. I was recruited into that movement. 30 years as a transgender. I was one of them little boys that thought I was meant to be a little girl. I ended up on my deathbed. I was working these streets. I told somebody today, the last time I was in DC, I was a transgender prostitute working these streets.
I was the depressed, suicidal, trans kid. I OD'd at 13 on pills. I sliced my wrist at 16. I sincerely believed that I was a girl trapped in a boy's body. I was without clarity that nobody is ever born in the wrong body. I have osteoporosis, commonly known as an elderly woman's disease. I am sterile, and I have been since before the age of 30. Mental issues that came along with the wrong sex hormones were devastating. Major chronic depression, severe mood swings, anxiety, PTSD, suicidal tendencies, and attempts. Nobody that knew me would have ever said that I was depressed or angry. They would have said that I was secure, I was content, and I was being the girl I was meant to be. None of them had a clue that I was emotional turmoil inside, that I lived in chaos in my head and in my body. Puberty blockers put little girls into premature menopause. Puberty blockers slow the natural development of brain, body, bones. We're sterilizing, we're medicalizing, experimenting on, and mutilating youth in the name of love and inclusivity. Puberty is not a disease. Puberty is not a condition. I was a transgender woman for over 20 years. I was a member of the lgbTQia gender movement for over 30 years. I've lived, breathed, and I have been this movement. I didn't live a lie, I became the lie. I was targeted. I was groomed. I was molested my entire childhood. I ran away from home because I couldn't be trans. And I lived on the streets of Philadelphia, where I started hormone therapy.
Is there, I really don't know the answer to this. I'm not, pretending I don't. Is there a group or a movement of people who went trans and
Yes,
regretted it
I'm
and
what
has
they
come
call,
back?
I am what they call a detransitioner.
Okay.
And there are thousands of us out there.
What percentage, to your knowledge, of those people, those folks, have had massive hormonal injections and or surgery?
All of the detransitioners that I know have went through hormone therapy and or surgical procedures.
And they regret it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
They're targeting your babies. They're preying on your children. I'm telling you, from somebody who has lived it, you do not want your baby. You do not want to confirm, affirm, promote, or allow your baby to get caught up in that transgender queer cult nonsense, that indoctrination, that dysphoria, that confusion, that condition. That, see, it's a condition. If it's confusion, it's a condition. If it's a condition, it needs healing, not hormones. It needs counseling, right? Not puberty blockers, not affirmation. It needs help. Listen, I wasn't held down and forced to do anything. I actually associated my molestation with love, which is why at 8 years old, I was cutting school and I was going and hanging out in a public bathroom on the boardwalk in Atlantic City, waiting for any pervert to come along. I would sit at bus stops and I would just sit there and wait. And he would always show up. Young or old, it didn't matter. But I was never held down and forced to do anything. And although there were times where I really believe that I tried to manipulate or instigate this situation as a child, it's still molestation. There's some things that are never meant, ever, never ever meant for a child to endure. And I gotta tell you, sex is one of them. When an adult engages with a child, it's a violation.
I was the 14-year-old runaway, homeless, trans kid that has been referred to here many times today.
I don't care if you believe it or not. When you hear it, you know it's the truth. There's something inside of you. That's why you get so angry. That's why you get so frustrated and shut it off. I'm not going to listen to him. The hell with him. He don't know what he's talking about. That's what the babies need right now. They need reality. They need clarity. Their minds are so fogged up right now that they don't know whether to scratch their watch or wind their backside. GLSEN is the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. They'll take care of the babies. GLSEN is teaching your children that they can be gender queer, that they can be queer, that they can be gender fluid, that they can be polyamorous, that they can be non-binary, which is non-existent. They want your children to be non-existent, right? They want your children to be demisexual. They want your child to think that they can be polysexual. They want your baby and your grandchildren to think they can be gray asexual. By the way, again, asexual, worms are asexual. We are people. We are not worms. We are human beings. We're not animals. We're not worms. We can't be asexual. It's an impossibility. Okay, we're talking about biology here. You know, if you have dogs, always come in male or female, right? And when you take your male dog and you get him neutered and you get him snipped, he's still your male dog. He doesn't change into a female dog. Archaeologists for thousands of years have been digging up bodies. They've always been the remains of males or females. Hello?
I was a transgender woman for over 20 years until my mental disorder was healed. The hardest part of detransitioning was accepting the fact that I suffered from an abnormal condition of mental confusion. That is the definition of gender dysphoria. I was the suicidal trans kid that's always brought up in these discussions. But I was also a suicidal trans adult because affirmation, acceptance, and transition does not take away mental confusion, depression, or suicidal tendencies. Every person that identifies into the transqueer gender movement is force-fed information that they are expected to repeat every time there are questions about biology or mental disorder being encouraged. The underlying issues and comorbidities go untreated while false narratives are pushed that being trans is normal. Anyone that knew me would have said I was happy, content, and secure being my true self. I was miserable, depressed, and suicidal. There are groomers pushing transqueer gender ideology and for more social workers in schools. There are blinded people in this room that have no clue what the rainbow that they worship stands for. It stands for perversion. There are men in this room that desire more school social workers to have total access to confused, vulnerable children and their private innermost thoughts. I was targeted as a child by groomers. I was victimized, molested, and raped the groomers in these same positions when I was a child. I was desensitized and sexualized by the adults in my life that I was supposed to trust and confide in. Anyone that defends hiding information from parents, encourages mental disorders, or stands up for the lgbTQia transqueer gender rainbow cult should not be near children. Social workers are not using evidence-based materials. They do not have integrity. They are using research done by pederasts and groomers that manipulate the system to give them more access to children's personal secrets and issues. Pouring money into mental health would allow these social workers to bring in outside resources and trans rights activists, giving these deviants more access to children. It would also allow them to be middlemen for providing puberty blockers and wrong sex hormones. I took wrong sex hormones for over 20 years. I was sterile and had osteoporosis before age 30. This was me. Stop pushing this cult's agenda of delusion and perversion on these children, because if you continue, you will all be guilty of the mental, emotional, and physical, irreversible damage being done to these victims, especially the social worker, Mr. McLaughlin. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary, who called herself Reds, molested as a child, confused and believed that she was transgender. It didn't take us long to be able to renounce that lie and get Mary on track. Hallelujah.
You are Mary. You are Mary.
I'm not that transgender
You are Mary.
son of a bitch.
And
I don't want to come to it.
Hey, listen to me. What your brother did to you,
It's water under the bridge.
I know it is.
But you're the one holding on to it.
No,
So
no,
if you
no, I'm
forgive
going.
him,
I'm moving
if you
forward.
forgive him and move forward, you know what? You don't forgive him for him. You forgive him for you.
Okay.
You forgive him, and
For
yet that
me.
releases you.
Okay, for me.
And so when all these temptations come your way, what do?
Like if people tempt me
You
to
knock
go-
them down and you knock them out of your way. And when you stumble and you fall, you get back up.
Yeah, what do I
And
do?
you seek God. But
Okay.
you have to go to a Bible-believing church. You cannot be in one of these buildings that are flying the homosexual flag. They're an apostate church. They're an apostate church. They are promoting what God has called an abomination. They're promoting it. They're promoting. You know what happens. How did you end up so confused? Because you were molested. And know what they call that? Recruited. They call that being see how encouraging. I want you to see how encouraged I am right now. I want you to see the progress. You think you can't do it. You've already done. You've already taken some major steps. You were pro-abortion and you thought you were transgender. And now you are pro-life and you know you're not transgender.
That's right, I'm not.
Hallelujah. Do you see that progress?
Yes, I do.
Do you know what a major thing that is to God right now? You're forcing your way through the darkness.